All right, so welcome everyone to this edition of Astro Duets. Today we have Roy Gillett and Amanda Williams with us, and we're going to be talking about the Jupiter-Neptune cycle. We're very excited about this session, which is like very active, very what's happening today. Well, like about what's happening today. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for all of the people that have made donations. This is a free event. If you haven't made a donation and you still want to do a donation, Wendy is going to put the link on the chat box. And also, before we go into this Jupiter Neptune, and I forget with all of the Neptune that's going to come down, I want to remind you that the next one is going to be on the 19th of April, and we're also going to be talking about another cycle, which is the Jupiter-Uranus cycle they're joining now, that we're joining soon in Taurus. And this time we'll have Chadranka Koik and Wendy Stacy with us. So that's going to be the 19th of April, and we ask you to sign up again for the event on the webpage. All right. So welcome everybody. Welcome Roy. Welcome Amanda. Thank you so much for being here to share your ideas. I think to start with the Jupiter-Neptune cycle, the first thing we should discuss is, well, what do you think these planets represent on its own, and then maybe to try to see what they may represent on the cycle.
Yeah, so well, I was going to, Amanda very kindly asked us to tell us all she knows about Neptune, and she has a very special reason for starting us off today, which I'm now going to ask her to go ahead with.
Yes, I'm starting today with a migraine, so I drugged myself up intensely in honor of Neptune, which modern astrologers would say that Neptune rules pharmaceuticals, among other things. And it is also very, very confused, and the whole concept of Neptune is something that's very difficult to pin down. It's ephemeral. It's really is one of the most difficult planets to focus, to describe, and to capture, I suppose. It's very indistinguishable. It blends the boundaries. It's the real opposite of Saturn, which is so rigid and definable and concrete, and there's Neptune just unraveling and kind of creating this sort of you see, I'm completely and utterly embodying it. So it's destroying, but not destroying in the same way as Pluto destroys, but very gradually and very gently and very intangibly. So but I think it also connects a little to Jupiter in that it sort of creates a sense of hope, of hype, almost, of this sort of belief that anything is possible. And when it's confronted by harder aspects from other planets, sometimes the reality of that is that it isn't possible. But when you have pure Neptune, anything is possible. All boundaries are gone. The universe is ever expanding, and you can have what you want. I think, and I think that neatly leads over to what Roy was going to say about Jupiter, I think.
Well, yeah, no, well, I'm going to talk a bit more about Neptune, and I'll be interested if anybody else wants to throw some stuff in after we've done this, because it's really important. I think Neptune is the crunch on this one. I mean, Jupiter expands, but Neptune is what is expanding. I mean, to me, it's so many levels. I mean, on one level, it's about the highest spiritual understanding, what your beliefs, what your religions are, what you're devoted to. On the lowest level, it's this whole tactile experience of sort of sensuality of so we get drugs. This is where you get the idea of drugs, alcohol, self-indulgence, and self-deception, as well as deception of other people, because the experience is so heightened, because you're in contact. Of course, Neptune is the god of the sea, Poseidon, and therefore the sea is in contact with everyone, everywhere, everything. And this is really so every emotion that happens, the feelings that happens, the vulnerability that you go through is all a part of the Neptune experience. And because of that, it's very sort of stimulating from an artistic point of view, because artistic painting, music, literature, but particularly music probably, and painting, something tactile, is very sort of part of the Neptunian experience. But as I say, it can be deceptive, and particularly relevant at the moment, of course, because Neptune has been going through Pisces for some time. It's now being joined by Saturn. And the suffering that you see in the world is very much a Neptunian experience. It must be happening in many people's personal lives as well. I think it's very much going through the consequences of everything that you have been through the whole zodiac cycle. So it's a very special concept for us to consider at this time in the cycles of astrology. I don't know if anybody wants to add anything on Neptune before we get on to what Jupiter's likely to do to it and start talking about the cycle itself.
Yes, Roy, there in the chat they're asking some questions. For instance, you talk about Neptune and the idea of sensuality and art, and some people are asking, how would you differentiate Neptune with Venus?
Venus is just something you love. Is sheer beauty, truth's beauty, beauty's truth, and all there is. Was it Keats who said that? But that is this Taurian energy, if you like. In a way, in many ways, Venus is an Earth energy. It does also, of course, rule Libra, but it rules Taurus, and therefore it is the physical manifestation of beauty and creative excellence. But Neptune is more experiential in a tactile sense. It is the actual emotional experience of feeling or deception. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, the sensitivity to art, that sort of feeling when you're enraptured by it, rather than just that's a beautiful painting, but that gasp of something almost unearthly that you feel when you see a painting talk to you, or a piece of art talk to you, I think, or a piece of music. Sometimes you just can't explain what it is about it, that it just takes you away and you're enraptured. I think that's probably the difference between Venus and Neptune.
You want to hang on to something that's beautiful and make it your own, your possession. But in Neptune, you're totally absorbed in the experience of it, because it's a water energy, it's not an earth energy.
Yeah, beautiful image. Yes, thank you. And then they're also asking, how would you stress the difference between, because you were mentioning about addictions, how would you stress the difference between Neptune and Pluto? Some people are saying, I thought Pluto was more about addictions.
Okay. Do you want to say something on that, Amanda?
Yes, I think Pluto's about obsession, that sort of addiction, the absorption. Neptune is about the experience again. It's very experiential, Neptune, about the experience of addiction and letting go when you of taking yourself away from the world, whereas Pluto tends to make you want something within the world and focus on it and pull yourself towards it more intensely. But Neptune, you don't want to do that. You just want to let go and be somewhere else, or be someone else, or it's a
experience of being traumatized. Sorry, go on, Amanda.
It's a very non-physical experience, Neptune, as opposed to Pluto, which is sort of physical.
Yeah, I think that's really just about it. But it's just that I get this feeling with Neptune that, think of an alcoholic Piscean. They just they find themselves drunk and keeping on drinking. It's not as if, I mean, yeah, all right, but I need to feel better, therefore I'll give it up tomorrow. That kind of mentality, I need to feel all right now. It's not obsessive, it's just experiential. Whereas with Pluto, well, I've got to get this drug. I'm going to go out and kill somebody if necessary. I've got to have it. It's much more dynamic and determined. It's a Mars energy as well. It's the difference between assertiveness and seduction, if you like. You're seduced by Neptune. You seduce others with Pluto. They're both, it could be about drugs, but in a very different way.
Yeah, nice, very nice. And here Jen wrote something about Neptune's atmosphere. It says Neptune's atmosphere is full of diamonds. So from its perspective, all is one. Everything refracts from each other, a shimmering star. Very nice.
Beautifully put. Would you like to repeat that? I'd like to hear it again, actually.
Yes.
Alasia.
Neptune's atmosphere is full of diamonds. So from its perspective, all is one. Everything refracts from each other, a shimmering star.
Yeah, nice one.
It's
Anything
very nice.
else?
And then somebody's mentioned Paul Simon's tune, Diamonds on the Soles of Her Shoes. That this image, so they're saying Neptune is about spirituality, intuition. Nice, okay.
Yeah, okay, so we better bring in Jupiter, hadn't we?
Yes, let's talk about Jupiter, yeah.
So I always like to, I don't know, this is my fancy probably, but I love to say, imagine that you could expand everything to infinity without delay. If there's no control, when you're comparing Jupiter and Saturn, there's no control. It's just expansion. And with Saturn, of course, you get the reconciliation between that tendency and the tendency to hold things firmly and not let them expand. It's the relationship between the two that is the most creative, one of the most creative factors of the way that astrology works. But so Jupiter expands, and it can expand appropriately and create great opportunities, or it can expand irresponsibly. I've known people getting killed on a major Jupiter transit because they couldn't control themselves. And so, it's not necessarily your friend, Jupiter. It's something, it's a planet of opportunity. It's a planet of, if you like, and take the higher level, a planet of justice, because Jupiter is really about being fair, being generous, being reasonable, giving everyone a chance. If it doesn't get out of hand, it's a wonderful imperial, regal energy. And obviously you put that together with Neptune, and you can just sit and meditate on that for about 10 minutes and you might get a bit of an idea. Yeah, that's all I want to say at the moment. Are you going to say, Amanda?
Yes, great expectations is the catchword for Jupiter Neptune, and the other one is bubbles. If you think of something ephemeral that just gets puffed up and puffed up and puffed up, and that both in the actual literal bubble, but in financial bubbles as well. I mean, there's nothing that creates a bubble quite like Jupiter Neptune, and Mr. Ponzi had Jupiter Neptune, I think, conjunction in his chart. So Ponzi schemes are also something that Jupiter and Neptune together will create for you, or you will create for them. It's it really is the absolute biggest amount of hope and optimism that you can possibly get. But then, of course, the downside is that at some point you have to face reality, because the cycle doesn't just go on forever. At some point it reaches a pitch, or it reaches another planet, which brings it down to Earth, and then
my Buddhist teacher Lama Zopa always used to say, yes, well, ice cream, very delicious. Ice cream is delicious. If ice cream is happiness, then keep on eating ice cream. Do not stop eating ice cream. Just keep on eating it. And and obviously you know what's going to happen if you do. So,
Yeah.
this is the story of Jupiter at its best and its worst. Yeah.
So would you
Um,
say that Jupiter Neptune might symbolize irresponsible expansion, like you were saying before?
Mm. Oh, yes. Yeah, well,
Yeah.
this is it. I mean, and we're going to, in a minute, look at, I think, the cycle of Jupiter and Neptune and how it relates to the other 45-degree multiple aspects in the cycle, and see how that relates to history and events in history. And
Mm.
we'll see, particularly now, if you like, but certainly throughout history, it's been a time of not necessarily that wise expansion, Jupiter, Neptune, but we just want to get the idea, the basic elements out, and then we could look at try to relate it to the,
Yes.
the circumstances we're in. Um,
Yes.
Now, do you want to talk about minor planets now, or do we want to talk more about Jupiter, Neptune as an archetype? I mean, if anybody wants to bring in anything more about what we've said already.
I would like to mention something in the chat. Tatiana is saying something I think quite interesting. Neptune and Jupiter both rule Pisces. She's mentioning, okay, we're still in Pisces, the sun is still in Pisces, and that's why she's bringing it up. But I think it's a good point that they share territory in some ways.
Yes, they share the sea, and again, the sea has no boundaries. So I suppose in some ways they have that similarity, that they both, in Jupiter because it expands, Neptune because it doesn't have any physical form. I think to get together, they both belong very well in the sea, which again doesn't have boundaries of its own. It relies on the earth to give it. It relies on land to give it an end.
Mm, mm.
Mm.
It's really the thing about Pisces, which is of course the sign with both Jupiter and Neptune. So in a way, it is Jupiter, Neptune is Pisces. It's this, as we say, the water energy. Is this ability? I mean, as an Aquarian, I've said, some people might have heard me say this before. I'm an Aquarian, but I've had a lot of relationships with Piscean partners, and I don't know, it's because I'm a bit of a masochist, but generally, if Aquarian thinks he knows everything, then you can be pretty sure the Piscean will show him what he doesn't know, and it's because of that quality of empathy and feeling. You can't talk your way out of emotions. You've got to feel your way into contact and understanding. And Pisces and Jupiter and Neptune together, that kind of archetype, is really the test of decency. And this is where it becomes quite spiritual for me. I can be quite eloquent about the wonderfulness of Pisces. And of course, you sometimes see it as a kind of crucifixion of suffering as you go through the transition from all the signs of the zodiac to the most experienced sign, Pisces, which is ruled by Jupiter and Neptune. So it's we're going through a very special time at the moment because of that, I think, in the world's history. We're going through all the suffering that you can go through, or not all of it, but a lot of it. And also at the same time, we're sort of preparing for something special to come afterwards.
Mm. Yeah. And Diana, I read your comment. I don't know if you would like to unmute yourself because I'm not sure if I'm understanding exactly what you mean. And
Sorry,
yes.
is that to me? Yeah, I'm wondering about Jupiter and Neptune and the possibility of fanaticism, especially religious fanaticism, where it's getting a bit hyped up and out of hand, and where I've just been watching this series on ITVX, which is about the Mormons. It's really interesting for anyone who's curious about, different religious ideas and so on. And there's a lot of conflict there between traditional ideas and modern ones. But it seems to come down to, on the one hand, you've got this great kind of religious devotion, which seems to me quite Jupiterian, but it could be quite Neptunian because it's spiritual. And on the other hand, there's a lot of kind of entitlement going on because those people see themselves as separate from society's rules in the story. I don't know enough about Mormons in general, but in the story. So there's this kind of entitlement issue going on, and it seems really paradoxical. On the one hand, people trying to be really spiritual and faithful and devoted, and on the other hand, they're doing really cruel things as well. A lot of animal cruelty to demonstrate points, and it's quite hard to watch. And yeah, it's just fascinating. It's like it's a bit boundless, the whole thing, and yet there's a lot of systematic stuff in religion, and it's like, how is this all playing out? That's just where my thinking went with it.
Yeah, yeah. Yes, it is very, very relevant, Diane. Thank you very much for that. Very relevant.
Yes, I suppose to some extent that is when Jupiter and Neptune combine with Saturn, when a Saturnian figure becomes the figurehead within a religious body, then I think the the feelings of faith, of pure faith, become infiltrated by dogma, and I think perhaps it's the dogma that is the problem rather than the faith itself. But others might have a different view.
Yeah, it's I think you're right there, but it is also that like this is just my opinion, but I think we all are of one mind, but we have different ways of getting to that one mind. And when you get stuck, it's a bit like a hurricane. It's a very quiet point in the center, but on the edges, it's incredibly dangerous. And the closer you get to the center, the more dangerous it becomes. And people become obsessive about the center when they're not there. And that's when they become dogmatic and start persecuting anybody who doesn't agree with them. It's a kind of insecurity. It's a yearning for the truth, whereas in fact, we should rest in the truth, not yearn for it. It's on the edge of being in the center, but not in the center. And I don't know if that's psychological nonsense, but that's how I sort of understand why people become so obsessed with religion when they're so devoted and yet so cruel in the way they implement it, because
Yes,
they don't tolerate other people.
there's that great quote, isn't there, that if you meet the guru on the road, kill him, for he's not the guru. I think that is, you should keep your search. You should always be searching for the answer. But if you start telling everyone you found the answer, then
Yeah,
perhaps that's when it goes
absolutely.
wrong.
Okay. Anything else, I hope, before we go on? Okay, so we're talking. I know you wanted to say something about minor aspects, Amanda, and their role, because of course in traditional astrology, I think they use semi-squares, did they? I'm not sure. Traditionally, I'm not sure about that.
I mean, what Chris was saying last time was that the use of the Ptolemy's aspects, became, something from the way things were done, and it became accepted. But they were always aware of other aspects and things. But that, the astrology built up without them because
Yeah.
that suited the belief system. Do you remember anything else that he said, Alejo?
Yeah, no, I agree. The Ptolemaic aspects where they kind of, not that they didn't know you could divide the circle by other numbers, but that they focused on squares, oppositions, sextiles, and trines, right?
Yes,
And
yeah.
conjunction, of course, but it's not
Yes,
considered
and
an
I,
aspect.
I think modern astrologers have started, and the software helps, of course. I mean, calculating a 45 degrees compared to a 30 degrees is so much easier when you can just press a button and do it.
Watch out for the biceptile.
Yeah, quintiles are still quite hard, and yeah, 72 degrees is not so easy to see when you just look at a chart. But yeah, so I think that's encouraged use of them. I think the use of midpoints has also encouraged use of the semisextile and the sesquiquadrate because it's they're 45-degree aspects. I think they do work. I don't use them a lot personally. I do sometimes, and if a chart isn't speaking to me with the, the 30, the 60, the 90 degrees, then I will start to look at more closely at 40 for 45 degrees aspects. But I mean, it certainly plays a part in the cycle, but to what extent you want to go into that much detail in everything you look at, I don't know. It's the same question as how many asteroids do you want to include in your chart? How many small aspects do you want to include in your chart?
Yeah.
I think that depends on what type of astrology you are. If you're a very mercurial and you have lots of Virgo in your chart, you might be able to do that very effectively. If you're not, perhaps not so much.
There's two factors about it. One is, of course, that we have the 4 quarter days and the 4 half quarter days between the quarter days. So the idea of 8 is a very important traditional concept. Whether it's been used, I think it has been used in astrology for rather longer than the quintile and some of the other aspects that we use today. Also, of course, in financial trading, particularly those people who are on the fringe between technical analysis and Gann analysis, the idea of 90 days, 45 days, even 22 and a half days becomes a very important sort of concept for deciding market movements. So, as I say, I don't know how ancient it is, but certainly it's very productive in today, both on the practical, using astrology practically, as well as in a more sort of cultural way as we're looking at it today.
Yeah, and
go on.
sorry, I want to pick up on something Amanda said. So what's interesting, I think one of the things that I think it's interesting on what Amanda said. So when you're saying it does work as a cycle, so I want to ask you both what you think. If you think these aspects are more effective, you also mentioned, Roy, about the what word did you use? Not the economics, but the markets. So if you think these minor aspects are more effective on a global level, on a collective level, but perhaps not so much on an individual chart, or do you think they're equally effective?
A very good point. I haven't really done a lot of study of my, I do a lot of monitoring myself when I was learning astrology. I haven't really looked at semi-squares that much. Funny, I'm glad you asked that, because I just made me realize I will start doing it and checking up, and ask me again in 6 months or a year's time. But certainly in the markets, they're used all the time. Those kind of things. So, have you used it in your chart, Amanda?
Not very much, no. I've got enough going on in my chart. Thank you very much. I don't need any more aspect.
Has anybody want to come up and say they found semi-squares very helpful?
I think somebody said they're dangerous.
Yeah, somebody says sesquiquadrates are dangerous. You can die on them. Oh my God.
I think you can die on anything, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think if they work for the markets, they must work. If they work for one element of astrology, they must work for all elements of astrology. And I think, but again, you can't. The orbs are small, so whereas an orb of a sextile might be a month. If it's outer planets with the semi square or the sesquiquadrate, it's only going to be 2 or 3 days. And I think that in a chart for an individual, it might make an event concrete, but you're probably more likely to notice something like Mars or the sun as a trigger of the event, the moon as a trigger of the event, rather than the minor aspect.
It's more to do with pressure, I think. Like I feel that particularly with the 90 degree or 45 degree multiples, you get this feeling this is the pressure. It doesn't actually cause things to happen. It creates a set of circumstances where some fast moving things like moon or even midpoints or angles can suddenly trigger things off, because the circumstances of stress indicated by the square or the semi-square are so potent that somehow something has to happen. But I wouldn't look to them to see events occurring. I would look to them to see an environment of possibility of events occurring, if you see what I mean.
Yes,
Yeah,
and that's certainly what I could see looking at the semi-square of Jupiter and Neptune over the last year in the three passes. It didn't really create that many events. It almost created the conditions that an event might have happened, but it didn't quite manifest. It was trying to do it, but it didn't, it then obviously decided it'd be better to wait for the sextile when the conditions would be easier. And
Yeah.
so perhaps that's how it plays out in an individual chart too.
Well, this might be we're getting to the point now. I don't know if there's other points on the chat box. We can wait a moment, Leo. But if I show this list of events that I've got, if I could share my screen and show that, is it
Yeah.
right to do that now?
Yeah, just quickly, some people on the chat box are saying that they find usually semi-squares more impactful than semi-sextiles. And then some people are mentioning the idea that maybe it depends on which planets are involved, if it's the lights or not,
Yeah.
or if they are forming an aspect pattern, let's say, like Thor hammer, or these aspect patterns that use these aspects, maybe they become more important.
Yeah, of course, there is the other side of all this, which is cosmobiology, and the idea of a graphic ephemeris is for 90 or 45 degrees, which a lot of people use to look for stress and trigger points. Is not so favourable nowadays as it was a couple about 20 or 30 years ago, but maybe longer. But it is really relevant. You can put up a whole graphic ephemeris of all these 45-degree separations and see where the stress of certain things are. So that'd be more a combination, not just one semi-square, but a combination of aspects.
Yeah. Okay, so yes, what did you want to show us?
Okay, here I go. So I'm going to share my screen. Just screen one. And that, oh, wait a minute. You should be able to see it now.
We can see Zoom for the moment.
Here comes the PowerPoint. And oh, I hope the PowerPoint comes up on the right screen. We might have a problem here. Let's see. Let's see what happens.
Should work. Yeah.
Yep. You can see the PowerPoint? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. Good. Let me just close that down. This is what I wanted to show you. Now, it looks a lot, but in fact, if we hang in there a bit, it is quite helpful. What I've done is got Solar Fire to generate the 45-degree multiple aspects from 1971 until 2028. And you can see there's a kind of pattern here, which is quite interesting. This would take us into more than just the semi-square, but we'll pick out how the semi-square and moments in this cycle in a moment. But you can see there that you've got the conjunction, then you get a semi-square, then you get a very long period of squares, sesquiquadrates, oppositions, more building up, and then you get to the waning semi-square, then you get the conjunction, then immediately after it you get the waxing semi-square. So it's almost as if the semi-squares surround this is my theory on it, at least, surround the conjunction. If the conjunction is just like any cycle, the conjunction is always the beginning of a new development. So we've discussed Jupiter and Neptune. So we've got the Jupiter-Neptune development, the expansion of a new cultural or experiential or emotional, all the things we've talked about just recently, an expansion of that in a new kind of way. And my idea is that the waning one shows the blaring down of the old assumptions of the previous cycle. Then you get the new cycle, then you get the trigger of the new cycle, the tension point that then builds up to the square, which then leads, obviously we've got trines and that coming in, but I'm only looking at 45-degree multiples at the moment. And then there's another growing period, and then you get that kind of cycle waning down, and then you get another cycle, you get another start and another one, and so it goes on. Now, if you look at when these events happened, Amanda, I remember when you first looked at it, you said that on that conjunction in 71, did America leave the gold standard or
Yes,
something?
that's right. It was the end of the Bretton Woods Agreement, and I think it was the August itself that it happened. It was supposed to be, allegedly, it was supposed to be temporary originally, and they left the gold standard. And of course, that was the end of the gold standard, and we will never return to it unless there's a new, a new formation of currency.
Yeah, wonderful opportunity to print money. So the next one, in the next conjunction, let's look it down here, is we're talking about 1982, is the waxing one. This is 82. Well, the main events in 82. Now, where are we now? Get my head back into those years. It was quite a significant time, wasn't it? It is, it's the end of it's the beginning of monetarism, isn't it, really? I mean, if September 80, where were we now? The square was September 80, the semi-square was September 82, and by the time you got to the conjunction, you got I mean, we talk about English politics for the moment, though others in other parts of the world might be able to put some ideas into their own country if they remember that far back. But basically, this was the big period of Thatcherism. It's the birth of monetarism. It's the whole assumption, a change of the sort of communism versus capitalism idea. It was more about a very different idea of economics that happened in this country. And then, of course, there was the miners' strike and the legislation about trade unions. And this got
Yes,
really underway as we get to 86.
Also, there by 85 there was the Big Bang, and 82 to 84 was the beginning of the privatizations as well. So it really was encapsulated the whole idea that no longer were we going to be state orientated. Everything was going to be private. Everything was going to be permissible. And there was by the late 80s there was the kind of not a cartoon but a satire on loads of money, and
loads of money,
a whole kind of
Harry Enfield
reaction. Harry Enfield as a reaction to this suddenly anyone could be rich if only they crossed their fingers, and they had a bit of luck.
When you sell all your possessions, it's pretty easy to feel rich for a while. Okay, well, the next one, I mean, we're just seeing how this works, is by we come to 95, you see there's 3 hits in 95 of the semi. And this is, again, the just before, in fact, just as, wasn't it? Just before Uranus moved into... Pluto moved into Sagittarius. That's right. Uranus was going to go into Aquarius as well, but Pluto has just moved into Sagittarius, and it's really building up. In 97, of course, you get the Labour Party, massive Labour Party victory in Britain, and a whole sort of optimism to start with, at least, that this was going to be, and the belief in the 90s, the late 90s, the belief that the internet would expand infinitely, and the economics as we had known it before wasn't going to be like that anymore, because the internet changed all the rules. And and there was this incredible expansion in the stock market from 95 to 2000, and this was, if you like, the trigger point. The semi-square before, get rid of the old nonsense way of doing things. Let's give people as much money as they need. Let's play around with credit cards and let's expand. And we're all going. It's all going to be wonderful. That kind of attitude of the 90s. Sorry, Johnny.
Yes, and in the US, you had Alan Greenspan talking about irrational exuberance, which is the perfect description of a Jupiter-Neptune cycle. And he didn't really have, I mean, everybody just shrugged it off. He was giving the warning, but the next cycle was beginning and people couldn't resist.
Yeah, and it was the products, the selling of resources in the 80s led to it led to a bit of a hiccup at the end of the 80s because of the fact that the resources were running out of money and that sort of stuff. But then this new credit, what you just said about Greenspan, enabled the expansion to carry on. And because we had this incredible expansion in technology, people just didn't think we had to apply the same sort of caution that we would have done in the past, maybe. So that's that cycle. Now we come to the next one, which is where that goes. Yeah, 2000, which 2009, is it? Where are we now? Yeah, the actual semi-square is January 2008. It couldn't be a more. The Northern Rock had a run just at the end of the year, with Pluto having just gone into Capricorn before it came back out again. And then, of course, as we went through 2008 into 2009, the major world economic crunch happened. And it's, in a way, it was the nemesis of monetarism, but it was a nemesis that the world couldn't accept. So the basic theory of monetarism is that if you're incompetent and you run out of money, then you have to take the consequences. But you can't do that if it's the whole world and the whole world banking system.
So you have to create quantitative easing.
So we have had, as the semi-square came in 2011, that period from the conjunction to the semi-square was a period of, I think it was Saturn Uranus in a kind of harmonious, in a relationship. I was going to square, but it's mutable. There was a mutable relationship between Saturn, and therefore Gordon Brown just couldn't bear to make people suffer. So we worked out this system where you didn't actually lose the money you had in the bank. Somehow we found the money from somewhere, and this is a new cultural attitude. And this is all Jupiter Neptune stuff, really, isn't it?
Yeah, but then if you sit down and you look at that period starting in 71 and particularly 81, and you chart national debts against the time, then you'll see it rising, and then these critical points where you'll see it rising even more, and the next one it rises even more, and to the point where it's almost going exponential. So it might seem on the ground as if everything is hunky-dory, but out there, the debt is just expanding and expanding and expanding.
Yeah. I've got a lovely diagram to show. I think I might show that after we've done this, actually, just to encourage discussion about shows exactly what you said. And now, of course, we come to the latest one. We come to the semi-square in, where are we now?
There, 2021.
Yeah, 21. Here we go now. 23.
A little.
Yeah, sorry, I'm running my head. Where's it going to go?
There.
You missed it.
You missed it. There.
Yeah, we go. Yeah. So 21 was the waning semi-square, which is the beginning of January. I mean, it's 2 days before the 6th of January invasion of Congress, just before the change of presidency. And then the conjunction happened in April 22, which we're struggling to come out of COVID. And then we've had 3 semi-squares between July 23 and March this year, which is why, well, I guess we're doing this one now. And of course, now we have a conversation, and that'll be quite interesting, as well, I've put down here COVID, alternative truth, debt 23 to 4, rapid development of AI, out of control relationships. And this is a part of a talk I've given, so there's more stuff to go. But it's we're at this point now where we're just starting a new cultural development, which seems to be coming out of the failure, the fundamental failure, probably of the whole of this period of time. From when we left the gold standard in 71, we're now at the point where, and I better show you this actually, just kind of head to this one. This is world debt from, where is it now? It's from quite a long time ago. From the end of the last century. The very high point there is World War II, and this is where we're at the moment. If everybody paid up their debts, we'd have to find $307 trillion, which is a lot of money. And so we are now seeking or struggling to find a new cultural understanding and suffering the uncertainty of that. Now, I don't know if you want me to stop sharing now and have a conversation, but that's, I thought, might be interesting for people to see.
Yeah, very interesting. Thank you. Yes.
So I'll stop for the moment. I can always I've got other things I can put up if we need them, but I think I'd like to hear from other people and see what they want to say. And Amanda, you should say more. I'm talking too much.
No, it's fine. No, I agree with everything you're saying, so I'm not going to intervene. No, I think the only thing I was going to add is just how many currencies and markets respond to this Jupiter-Neptune cycle, and even currencies. Russia, interestingly, the ruble. Even Putin has a quincunx in his chart between Jupiter and Neptune. But the markets, the FTSE has it as a conjunction, the Nasdaq has it as a conjunction, the Shanghai Composite has a quincunx, and the Sensex has a sextile. So it's really dominant in the main stock markets. It's also dominant in the currencies. I mean, there's no real chart for sterling. So I mean, I tend to use the Bank of England chart from 1694, and that's got a sesquiquadrate in it. But that's partly because it was the formation of the Bank of England was a response to what had happened in the previous cycle. The US dollar has a conjunction of Jupiter and Neptune. The yen has a sextile. The renminbi doesn't have an aspect in its original chart, but it has by a square by progression. And the Bank of India has a sextile, which, I mean, okay, it's a quite a fast moving cycle. The Jupiter moves a sign on each year. So a lot of charts will have some aspect, but this is way above what you'd expect by chance.
Yeah.
And so clearly there's a financial implication to this, and clearly what happens in the Jupiter-Neptune cycle is going to affect a lot of currencies and a lot of markets, not to mention a number of countries as well.
I was thinking about this when you both were presenting this. Is there a way, because you were saying, okay, this is what happened in England, and then sometimes you were bringing some ideas of the USA, because of course it's what you know, right? But is there a way to know in which countries it's going to be more impactful?
You can, I mean, you can, if you've got the database with all your countries on it, and you can run on Solarfire a really easy search that.
Well, Nick Campion's World Astrology, World Horoscopes, you can get that to work on Solarfire.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes, exactly. So you can run all these. I mean, I could add the Argentinian peso has a conjunction of Jupiter and Neptune with Chiron in its chart, and the Venezuelan Bolivar has a square. So it goes on and on and on. I didn't want to, not everybody listening was interested in smaller countries, but I just wanted to focus on the main markets initially. And it even goes down to, if you look at Elon Musk, he has a conjunction, Tesla has an opposition, and Twitter has a square. So you really see it coming up in all the things that we now talk about, that we now think are part of today's, financial culture, and it's all tied up with this cycle, which potentially can just go out of control.
I was just mention that some of my talks, I've been reminding people that in the 1776, the year that the American Declaration of Independence was given, another thing happened, which was the publication of Adam Smith's The Wealth of Nations, which is the foundation of modern economics in many ways. and it comes up to its Pluto return, or it did last year, I think. Roughly with the same time as the US Pluto return. So it is the Pluto return of an economy that was based on the idea that resources were limitless to a world population of less than 1 billion people. But now we're trying to run a world economy with a population of 8 to 9 billion people. And we're finding on all the countries, not just the Western European countries, are trying to be the producers for the world. And we're finding that the resources are not limited. So this is a fundamental transformation that alongside we're trying to find a new philosophy, a new way of doing things with the Jupiter Neptune. Where do we go from here? You know, it really is a time of not quite being ready to face up to the reality that we've been trying to avoid. Many people would argue we've been trying to avoid since the 1930s, when the New Deal and World War II got us out of the apparent problem. But certainly we've been trying to avoid it since the end of the 90s. And I don't know if we can avoid it any longer. And therefore we're on the edge of the suffering of the end of a cycle and the beginning of a new one, which we don't completely understand.
Mm.
And this is what the Neptune stupid square is saying. Find it out, you know, what are we going to do?
Yeah. They're asking about Bitcoin and all of this virtual currency. If it might be a way to try to, I'm thinking if it might be a way to try to escape again from this
Yes,
reality.
it might. A lot of the, not Bitcoin itself, but a lot of the other cryptocurrencies did have Jupiter and Neptune aspects in them, and of course a lot of them have soared and then plunged. But Bitcoin continues. I don't think it itself going to be a currency now. It's worth too much to be distributed between 7 or 8 billion people. But you know, a similar concept could become the future. It could be the answer to where we are, but I don't think it'll be Bitcoin, and I don't think it's going to happen quite yet.
Yeah, I mean, the point is that Bitcoin, when it was put on the Chicago Board of Trade, became no more than any other currency. It might be created rather differently, but it's still a currency depending on other currencies.
Yeah.
And therefore, I suppose I should study this more before, so you shouldn't really listen to me because I might not understand it well enough. But it seems to me that it can't be more than that. And events recently of these virtual currencies have seen is confirm my suspicion that they're no more than currencies subject to the same problems of currencies and relationships with other countries, depending on all kinds of not only astrological, but all sorts of other factors. Really, I feel that the new culture, I've mentioned this to a few people, if you think of a mobile phone and how incredibly subtly efficient it is, and how increasingly the economic system is being digitalized and integrated. Recently, the banks in England sent out requests for profiles. I mean, those profiles, put them all together and program them in and link them in with the major things that we do online and with the government and everything. Increasingly, the independence of the individual, and particularly with all the password stuff and all that sort of stuff, the kind of idea of the 666 chip on your wrist or something like that that people were talking about 40 years ago may be about to come into fruition with the Pluto and Aquarius. And this will enable all the rules of currency and distribution to go through a radical transformation of efficiency, rather like trading has gone through it with things like Amazon and Google and that sort of stuff. I mean, this is the way, I think, could be a part of the new cultural understanding. As we get out of Pisces, we stop suffering and start on a new Aries future.
What do you mean? New wars, you mean?
Pardon?
New wars.
Wars?
Yeah, well, Aries in, being territorial as opposed to
I don't know. I know the Aries. I don't know what it's going to do. I mean, it's called conjunct Neptune, so it's a belief in the beginning. You know, Aries is the fall in the tarot. It's the beginning of new possibilities. You don't. There's no responsibilities anymore. You know, responsibilities bear down you with incredible suffering in Pisces if it's not going well. I mean, there's good stuff with Pisces. Pisces is beautiful. It's sensitive. It's loving. It's kind. It's supportive. But the negative experience of Pisces is very much bearing down on you. But when the energy moves into Aries, that's a thing of the past. You have suffered enough. You have to start again. You're not quite sure where you're going or what you're going to do, but you've got to take the first step. You know, the journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step, sort of thing, you know. And that's what's coming up as we move through 25 into 26.
Yeah. We have a few minutes left, and I want to mention some things that are happening on the chat. Christina is saying, I don't know exactly how you pronounce this in English. Hence the BRICS, do you know this group of countries, the BRICS, you call it?
Brazil,
Announcement.
Russia, India.
Yes.
Sorry, what was that again? Could you say it again, please?
The BRICS announcement to dissolve the US dollar as the main trading currency and move towards a new standard.
So the change in the world currency. Yeah, okay. So what did they want to comment on it?
I mean that it may be related to this cycle that is happening with the Jupiter Neptune.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. Go on.
I think the issue with currencies is that they are, the problem with them is that they were originally backed by something, whether it was gold or whatever. They've become detached from that, which is very Jupiter Neptune, and Bitcoin was a reaction to that, to try and create something that was not, you know, getting bigger, getting more and more detached. But the problem with Bitcoin is it starts off not having it doesn't have any fundamentals to start with. The others have lost touch with the fundamentals. So what you need is to create more fundamentals. I'm not sure that the BRICS could just use another currency to you know, overtake the dollar. They have to create the fundamentals to make it valid, to give it the substance that you know can give.
The trouble is that China is incredibly indebted country. You know, it's incredible pouring out credit to keep the production system going, and so you know it's fundamental. If it's going to be an intrinsic part of this new currency that they want, you know, then if it hasn't got the credit, then you know. It's a complicated system, but I think it's not about that. In any case, it's not about any one system. It's about a technique, like I was trying to describe before. It's a virtual experience. It's, you know, for 200 years, from 1800 to 2020, we were only on Jupiter-Saturn cycles based on Earth. The conjunction always happened in Earth, except on a very couple of occasions. From 2020, it started in air, and it's going to carry on for another 200 years. So this 200-year period, triggered off by Pluto in Aquarius, is going to be very much about air. So whereas in the 200 years before we were doing everything on the basis of having things or a system of economics that was based on values and material things, solid, it's going to be airy now. Now, we can hardly begin to understand what that will be like. It might be that we don't actually have to have things in quite the same way. We're struggling to understand it.
I think that's probably true. I think physical things are going to be less important, and wealth will be less important, or that the type of wealth that we've acknowledged in the past.
Yeah.
Wealth will be something more. It'll be about human relationships. It'll be about connections and excuse me.
Yeah.
You know, and some, as you say, a social contract that we can't at this moment even envisage how that's going to be, and what we consider to be successful in 200 years' time is very different to what we've considered success to be in the last 200
Well,
years.
we have vowed to succeed at. Can I add another dimension? I know we're going to finish soon, Ajo, but we have concentrated a lot on economics and business, and there's another whole dimension to this Jupiter Neptune, which is to do with relationships. And if you look over the period that we've studied, that from 71 and particularly the end of the 70s through to now, there's been an incredible degeneration in the relationships in one sense. In another sense, there's a tremendous spirit of generosity and kindness in the environment, and yet there's a practice of selfishness and negativity and exclusivity and cultural conflict in the political or global relationships. You know, in the 70s, I traveled around the world from one side to the other without any real restrictions. I did it overland. I couldn't do that now. And, you know, with the Arab Spring, with all those Uranus Pluto squares, is that right? No, Saturn, yeah, the squares, yes, the Uranus Pluto squares, and then the Saturn Neptune square, which led to the alternative truth and the relative, all that sort of stuff, and all the borders that are going up and the refugee stuff and all that. It's upsetting relationships, and of course, the relationships that we're suffering right now are so horrible and so tearing. And it's almost like it's a Piscean look. Do you really want to be that unkind and horrible to each other, or do you want to be a bit more decent? And this is the question that we're being asked this year and next year as we go through this election process. And that's a part of the Neptune Jupiter semi-square, preparing, of course, for what's going to happen in the next session next month, where Wendy and Jajanka are going to take you through the trauma of the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. The last time the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction occurred was on the 8th of May, 1941, when Liverpool had suffered the worst bombing experience in the whole of, except for London, in the whole of British experience of the war. And of course, just before Pearl Harbor. So we are going through a very traumatic time, not just economically, but also in our personal relationships. And hopefully we can do better than just be nasty to each other. Hope when we get into the Aries energy, we'll be able to start a rather more free and liberated relationship.
I hope so. All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Roy, Amanda. Thank you so much, everybody who came and shared your ideas. There's always, on the chat box, there's always another discussion going on. It's so interesting. And I wish we had time to bring everything together, but it's so nice that everybody, I think this has been very inspiring, and we're all living with many thoughts and reflections. Yes.
Yeah, we're going to get there.
Yes.
Thank you very much for doing such a lovely job getting these things going. I know it's beautiful. And to everybody else for coming. It's great. Keep coming every month.
Yeah, so the next one is going to be, remember, on the 19th of April. You still need to sign up, please, on the webpage about Jupiter Uranus, like Roy said, with Jadranka and Wendy. And it's going to be lovely to see you. Thank you, everyone. We're going to ask you now, because we cannot, I'm going to stop the recording.